All right, welcome to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Friday, April 24th, 2020. We're glad that you guys could tune in tonight's show. Tonight we have a special treat for you guys. Inventor Lee Wheelbarger is joining us tonight for a call-in show and just basically open topic. We can talk Grand Solar Minimum related growing issues, and of course current events with the whole COVID, as Lee has had an interesting involvement as well with this whole situation. But first, Lee, thanks for joining us tonight. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure as always.
Good to have you back once again. It's been a while. I know you've been pretty busy. You're working on multiple projects as we speak. And before we start tonight's show, did you get a chance? I know you've been busy, so have you had a chance to check out the Michael Moore documentary on Planet of the Humans?
No, not yet. I do want to do that, but I haven't seen it yet.
So Mari and I'm actually thinking about doing a review on this tomorrow, but I will say it is going to be worth your time. Mari was a little cautious about telling everybody to hurry up and see it the night that I discovered it. I didn't watch the whole thing yet. I only watched 16 minutes, but I was pleasantly surprised. For the most part, they don't really get in too much about man-made global warming, but what the interesting part is that suppose the stuff that's the green energy, the how we make it, the solar panels, the batteries, all the equipment needed for these projects, you would be amazed at how much chemicals and pollution burning these materials that goes into making this green technology. You'd save the environment if you just went from straight fossil fuels in the first place. So it's a great documentary, and I recommend it. Like I said, I think tomorrow I might come back on live and do a quick little review on it, a little live chat with that. But Lee, so we've had some interesting weather. I'll kind of get things started for us tonight. The South, we've noticed now 3 weeks in a row of severe weather that starts off in the weekend or late week and goes into the weekend. And this is a pretty common part of the country that gets tornadoes overnight. But is it me, or does it seem like this year we've kind of started off on every weekend we get overnight tornadoes and bad ones?
Well, this is expected. This is the change in the jet. This is what you and I have been talking about for almost 4 years now, that as the jet moves further south, we're going to see these cold air fronts coming down and interacting with warm tropical moisture. And that's what creates these tornadoes, one going under the other as they interact. And so as we go farther into the grand solar minimum, these jet streams are going to continue to come further south. We're going to have more cloud cover. We've got more cloud nucleation because of the coronal hole streams. So there's more up there. So when you have more particles in the atmosphere, more moisture, what have you, when that interacts, it becomes more violent. So you get the storms, you get the tornadoes, you get the unbelievable hail, you get the downpours, you get the giant rainstorms. They call them I forgot what the giant clouds of down. Some people call them the bombs, the rain bombs. So you get the rain bombs. You get the and there's another name for a raindrop bomb. I was trying to think of what it was. Some people call them microbursts, but these are much bigger than microbursts. So we're going to see this. This is what you and I have been talking about for, like I said, 3 or 4 years now. And we're going to see that from the panhandle of Texas all the way up across Oklahoma. And we're also going to see a shift in, so you can see right there above that high, above Dallas there to the left. So you're going to see right where the panhandle comes down, the base of that, just to the west of the H next to the Dallas. From there, you're going to have a stripe that goes across there. The upper part of Arkansas goes through Tennessee and Kentucky, up through the eastern half of the North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, all those northeastern states, New England states. And that's going to be the track. We've seen that historically with rain data that we've gathered from deep lake sediments and so on and so forth. So during every grand solar minimum, we get more violent weather in that area and a lot more rainfall. And that's what the farmers are experiencing now. This is exactly what we told them that they were going to see 3 years ago. And they're still calling every week wanting to know, what do I do now, Lee? What do I plant now? And I tell all the farmers, get tractors with tracks, short season corns, put it in late, take it out early, and go for soybeans and corn. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is that jet that we always get when there's a grand solar minimum. That jet comes farther down than it normally does. It's more of a plunging jet. So it's going to be going farther down into the Gulf, and it's going to be capturing more of that moisture and pulling it up for that interaction. So it's only going to get worse. And somebody's saying they're not hearing Jake.
Probably works when you unmute the mic. I don't want to it's double when you're talking and my mic is picking up your audio, so I'm trying to go back and forth. So I'll have to remember to unmute that. Thank you out there in the chat, and thank you, Lee. Yeah, I was just looking at the weather for the rest of this month, and May is going to be about average. The Northeast is finishing out kind of chilly. A lot of people I've heard the naysayers talk about how mild of a winter we had, but I mean, the one thing that I always remember you've told me, Lee, was shorter summers and longer winters. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, for me anyway, here in the Northeast, I've seen snowflakes just 2 days ago. And the first snowflake I saw up here was last September. So right now I'm getting about 4 months without snow. Now, this part of the state that I live in is close enough to the East Coast where usually this part of the United States benefits from when that ridging happens, where you get that warm, mild air being pushed up the East Coast into the Northeast and then followed behind a cold front. But surprisingly, I'd say we're about 6-7 degrees below average so far up here for the month of April, which, and this is just opinion here. I know you're not the expert on this, but I know you follow it. Dr. Roy Spencer's UAH, the temperatures, it went down from 0.77 to 0.48. Any speculation just based on what we're seeing here in the continental 48? Do you think that's going to continue to go down, or was that just a fluke and went down just for 1 month?
Oh, no, it's going to go down. This is the beginning. This is what I've been telling everybody 4 years now, that 2020, just like Zarkova says, this is where we start pushing off the top of the hill and start going downhill. So between now and 2028, we can look for a minimum of a 0.8 to 1 degree Celsius drop. So that's coming. And when you look at what that does to the grow seasons globally, it's catastrophic to a lot of regions. So North Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Idaho, Washington, northern Idaho, northern Wyoming, parts of Nebraska, Illinois, all of those states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, they're all going to be seeing these colder temperatures creeping down from the Arctic Circle. And they're going to have a much, much more difficult time getting the crop into the field because it's going to be wetter, less sunshine, so the fields won't dry up as quick. It won't be as easy to get in and plow and fertilize and seed and so on and so forth, and then put in pesticides, what have you, throughout the summer. And then in the fall, again, with more moisture, it's cooler. You're going to have wetter fields again and more rainfall. It's going to be more difficult for the equipment to get out into the fields and, get the crop in. And I'm telling everybody, there's a company called McKinsey that makes buggies or carts, whatever you want to call them. And those buggies are how they get the field out. It's basically a tractor trailer load of grain or beans or whatever it is behind the tractor, and they carry it out from the combine. They carry it out to the tractor trailer next to the road and offload it. And so I'm recommending everybody buy the Kinseys with the dual wheels and the tracks, so as they're not getting their wagons or buggies stuck in the fields. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot more equipment with tracks on it globally to be able to get in and out of the fields. We've got to do more like some of the countries in Europe, because they're already dealing with these conditions and have been.
So I see, Mari, you might have some questions in the chat. Why don't you go ahead and get us started here? You have a question for us? I know one of our paid members, Cheryl.
Cheryl, yeah. And I just let everyone know in the chat if you wanted to give us a call. I have the lines open and our numbers posted either on the community tab on YouTube, if you're a member on YouTube, or on our Patreon page on Patreon. Cheryl, we did discuss our last live show about lighting. She's interested in what to do for indoors growing, what would be ideal, what should she be looking for. So we're going to pick Lee's brain, and we could talk about the light we have. I don't know if we're set up to actually show it on camera or not tonight, probably not, but I'm going to be doing some videos with what we got going on soon anyway. So Lee, what do you think about grow lights for Cheryl?
I personally love grow lights. And the reason that I love grow lights is you can actually put a solar panel on your roof and grow more light, more veggies, and so on and so forth with the energy collected by that solar panel than you could if you had that be a window and allowed lights in, the sun to come in. So you can actually convert the light, because when the sun is shining on a solar panel, there's supposed to be about 1,360 watts per square meter hitting that panel. And an effective solar panel will capture 22, 25, 28% of that. There are some that are much higher, but they're extremely expensive. That's outside of our, bank account, above our pay grade. But the ones that are, 20% or 22%, they're capturing 22% of that light and putting it in batteries or what have you. But if you look at the individual, say like 7 frequencies or individual frequencies of light, it's red, blue, yellow, and some others in there. And you need to look that up for the crop that you're trying to grow. The light requires different frequencies at different times of the crop's maturity. So if you have just a simple blue light at about, I think it's 440 nanometers is the blue, and I think it's about 667 nanometers is the red. But you can get them at Walmart in a grow light strip. It's 12 volts, so it'll run off of a car battery, and you can put those up. That's what we had at the ranch in Florida, and we strung those up to improve our yield on some testing that we did. So you can use that light from Walmart. It's I believe the LED size is an 050 is what we had purchased. They're not that expensive. And I would put those up. I would also look at what you are going to be growing and then identify what frequencies of light are best for that plant at different parts of its maturity. The other thing you want to keep in mind is don't leave the light on 24 hours a day. The plant uses light as a clock. So as the time goes on in the springtime, the days get longer and longer and longer, and the plant realizes that and sees it. But as you get to the summer solstice and the days start becoming shorter, the plant also sees that and triggers things within its maturity to start, budding out or putting down seeds or whatever it's going to do. And so what you have to do is make sure you have the correct frequencies of light at the correct stage of the plant's growth. And if you don't do that, you will end up having a plant that looks deformed. So, for example, if you take away some of the red at a certain part of the plant's growth cycle, you can actually make a dwarf plant because it's not getting the frequency of light that it needs to grow in height. So you can actually manipulate that. So I would recommend, and I could go on for days about this because I've done years of research on it. But you need to identify what plants you want to grow. Get the lights from Walmart. Recommend using the 12-volt lights. That way in a GSM, if you lose power or what have you, you can run it off 12 volts, a solar panel. They don't put off a lot of heat. And just look at what each plant needs and try to give it those frequencies of light. But as far as a base light, I would go with the light strips from Walmart. They're cheap, easy, and they got a glue on the back. You can stick them on your walls or your ceiling. I do recommend that you don't stay in the room with that grow light. Don't put it in a room that you're going to be in constantly because there's frequencies of light in there that aren't real good for you, like the 440. We haven't even begun to see the cloud cover. The cloud cover is going to be here in 2028. We're at just the beginning of it because as the sun gets weaker, it has, and they just said again, can't hear Jake. So as the sun gets weaker, the sun has more coronal holes. Those coronal holes spew out cosmic rays, teeny weeny little particles that fly through space and they impact with our atmosphere, stratosphere, so on and so forth. And they create cloud nucleation, which makes more particles. So as one particle comes in, because they're charged from anywhere from 7 to 11 tera electron volts or 3 to 7 tera electron volts, depending upon whether it's a cosmic ray or a galactic cosmic ray. But when they come in, they cause showers that look like little sparklers coming down through the atmosphere. So one particle comes in, but it makes as many as a sparkler would put off. And this is happening constantly. And it's only going to get worse. So each time we go through a coronal hole stream, we get more of this cloud nucleation on the planet. And that's based on the research from Heinrich Svensmark and the early research from Dr. Jasper Kirkby at CERN. Later on, his research became tainted by global warming, and he had to pull back from his original findings. But the facts are there. When you have more cosmic rays, you have greater cloud nucleation. And so we're going to see that continue through 2028. And then from 2028 to 2032, it will level off. And starting in 2033, 2034, it will start clearing back up again. And will probably take us about 5 to 7 years to come back out of that. At least 5 anyway.
I want to thank Marie. My microphone, I'm having difficulties apparently, but thank you, Marie, for the question on cosmic rays. Well, actually just cloud coverage. But yeah, you're right. This is just the beginning. And I think throughout the years of doing this research, we've had our share of followers that come and go. And I don't think some folks just don't realize that this is not going to be an overnight sensation. This is going to take some time. The grand solar minimum is at the very, 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 it's like the appetizer of the appetizer. But like you said, around 2028, and that's what I've been saying too, we'll start seeing some serious, you think we've seen cloud nucleation now and highly charged particles in our atmosphere with all the lightning and purple skies and the volcano eruptions, huh? The sprites, yeah, the big sprites. And
oh yeah, they're going off where they used to be extremely rare and now everybody sees them.
And faint. Now they're huge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
big stuff. GSM is just so many. There's so many components to everything about temperature and crop loss. But one thing is for sure, we've seen our share of moisture over across the middle part of our country and in the south. And a lot of folks were worried about possibly a late plant for 2020. Now, right now, last week I checked the crop report, and it didn't seem to. But it's early in the year, so it's not like we're putting crops in the ground. Generally, ideally, since you have a lot of experience with crops and stuff like that, how long do you push it? As far as two things, it's a loaded question. The first one is, if you can't harvest your crop in the winter, is it safe to harvest the crop February and March before you start your plant in April and May? Mara, you have your hand up.
There's a call.
There is a call. Okay. All right, we'll get to that call in a minute. But I'm just curious, is there a time limit when some of these farmers that can't get the crop out of the field, say like, in December, and they try to do it again in February, March, is it more pressure on a farmer or crops to get the crop in the ground from harvesting so late?
It's pressure from day one till it's in the barn. It's unbelievable. And now it's super difficult. And yes, people are being delayed. I just got called by one of my best friends, I guess it was 4 days ago, and he told me they're 2 weeks behind on getting in the ground. They got 7,000 acres they got to plant, and they ain't started yet.
Wow.
So, not every farmer has 100 acres. There are the big boys that have, 7,000, 10,000, 20,000 acres that they get planted with a team of men over multiple states. And it's bare. And that's why I'm telling the guys, they're getting the tracks. I got a lot of people taking the advice of the tracks on the tractors, and on their buggies and carts. So yeah, it's a pain in the butt to get it in, or to get it in the ground, because if it's too soft, you can't do anything with it. There's nothing you can do if it's wet other than wait for it to dry up so that you can get the tractors across. And then, put your your seeds in the ground and see what you get. And then again, everybody's trying to go short season now. And by going with the shorter season, they can get it out of the ground, and get it into the barn quicker, so that they don't have to wait that late in the season. But the problem is, not all corn is silage corn, so you can't just shoot it all up and put it in a silo or put it in bags. Some of it is picking corn, some of it is whole corn. So you've got to wait for that maturity of it. So you're stuck with waiting for Mother Nature to dry it out enough that you can pick it and haul it. Because if the moisture's too dry or the moisture's too high, you got issues unless you're going to run it through a dryer. And if you run it through a dryer, now you've got, just like last year, you got propane issues. The guys can't get enough propane to dry enough corn. So people have high moisture corn and it molds. So then you lose the whole thing. So it's not an easy thing for any of them, these conditions. Everybody says the same thing. We've never seen anything like this.
Yeah,
and we're going to see a lot more of that.
I've seen that from a few farmers, and the last year, the shortages of propane from so many farmers drying the grain. I followed a few people last year, Millennial Farmer, a very informative farming channel, and he told it how it was. He was straight up. They didn't get all the propane that they really wanted, but they got enough to get the job done. All right, Mari, we have a caller, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
If the name didn't come through, it came
Well,
out a little bit gargled on
surprise guest.
on the screen.
Let's hear it.
So, all right, we'll bring our caller in. Caller, welcome to GSM Live.
Yeah, hi, is this Mari?
This is.
Hey, Mari, it's Brian Foltz. How are you?
Who is it?
Brian. It's Brian Foltz.
Hey, Brian. Glad you were able to get through.
Yeah, finally, yeah. Took a while. Lee, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
All right. I heard in the past that you were funded by the federal government in ways that were not, I guess, wonderful for us.
Don't really understand what that means. I don't think I've ever gotten any money from the funding or from the government that wasn't wonderful for everybody. What was that?
Are you funded by the federal government in any way?
No, not now. I am not funded by the federal government in any way.
Not before you were?
I've been a researcher for.
I had a problem with you in the past. I guess it was because that was when you were funded by them. Maybe now you're.
I haven't been. I'm not funded by the government. I work on government contracts and have been a government contractor for 30 years. So I work for corporations that contract to the government. So, for example, I worked at the Dismounted Battlespace Battle Lab at Fort Benning, Georgia. I was the senior technologist for that laboratory. I was paid through a company that paid me as a contractor to work in that facility because the U.S. government did not have someone with my knowledge base. So during that period of time, I worked on Force 21 Land Warrior. I did
understanding what was going on, I guess. I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah. I'm just a contractor. The government doesn't send me a check every month. I've never received a check straight from the government. I always work for a corporation like TAMSCO or L3 or somebody like that.
I misunderstood.
Okay. All right. Glad you got it now. Thank you.
How are you doing now?
I'm doing great. We're currently down here in Texas, and we're working on power systems for vehicles and heating systems for vehicles that are going to Arctic conditions. So we're doing well.
Great.
All right, Brian. Well, thanks for the call. Unless you had another question here for us tonight.
No. I'm sorry. I just in the past I've heard so many bad things, and I guess I just wanted to bring it out if I could, and perhaps have other people like me who were misunderstanding things in the past about Lee, that we might be able to bring it out and clear that up. No,
it's totally.
Yeah, no, I've never gotten a check from the government. I wish I did. I didn't even get one for the COVID-19. So how about that?
Take care, y'all.
All right, see you, Brian.
I love y'all.
Thanks, buddy. Have a good night.
Bye.
You know, that's understandable. Things change a lot. And so I think he was very respectful in the way he positioned the question. And I appreciate the maturity. If you have a question like that on something, this is the way you should present it instead of being offensive and ad hominem. So I think Brian did a really good job. You know, he had a misunderstanding, obviously. And, you guys are going to know just from listening to this channel with Lee and everything, he's just straight up. He's a straight shooter and he's got nothing to hide. So,
and I think as
I got accused of being a 5G installer the other day.
Well, I think it just, with YouTube, it comes with the territory. There's always some kind of conspiracy. There's always some kind of controversy. There's always someone pissed off at someone else. There's always trolling back and forth either ways. And I think the longer you're on YouTube, the more numb you become to it. But, in the past, I think all of us have been caught up in some very just nasty things. And, I think most people have learned just to sort of move on from it. But a lot of people got, a lot of viewers and subscribers got caught in the crossfire in the past. So, I'm glad he asked it and kept it kosher and cool and
that's how it's supposed to be done.
So, the lines are still open if you guys want to call in. We got about a half hour.
So, Lee, since we got a little bit of time here, you had some involvement. Now, before we get into this, I'll just let you know that when you first told me about your idea, I know I would try it, but I also have read a couple of things about this remedy that could be a problem for someone if they have an addictive personality. But go ahead and share with us real quick. This is kind of off topic of Grand Solar Minimum, but you have had some involvement with COVID-19. If you could share a little bit about the rubbing alcohol theory that you had presented to me and apparently the White House.
Yes. So a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, my wife and I were on a yacht in Washington, D.C., and we came into a coughing fit that was like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen people exposed to anhydrous ammonia, and there's no coming up. When you start the cough, normally you cough for a while, you can breathe, and you cough for a while. But when this cough comes on, it just doesn't stop. It's just and it's exhausting, and you actually lose control of your body. You can't even stand up. You're just lying on the floor, basically convulsing, and in a puddle of sweat because you can't stop. It's worse than dry heaves. And so I was desperate for something to stop this coughing, because I was to the point of where, with my medical experience with EMS and so on and so forth, and my wife being on the boat, she's doing the exact same thing. I'm wondering, okay, which one of these hospitals around here am I going to go to and die because I've got COVID-19? So it got to the point of where I was ready to call 911, but I was coughing so bad that I couldn't. And I went and I said, I've got to do something to get this feeling out of my throat. To me, it feels like a spider crawling around on your tonsils. My wife expresses it as it feels like there's popcorn bubbling in your throat. But either way, there's something tickling your tonsils back there, and you just cannot stop coughing. So I got a bottle of Listerine, and I gargled with the Listerine, and I did it a couple times, and I'm trying to get this feeling out of my throat. And as I started breathing through my mouth, I could feel my chest opening up, and I could start to breathe again because of the vapors off the Listerine. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This is weird. It's different. What the heck's going on here? And so I started looking at the chemicals that were in Listerine, and I'm like, well, I don't want to keep sniffing this. That's, they're not good things to be sniffing on. So I said, what else kills COVID-19 or cuts this stuff or kills a virus? So I started doing quick research and found isopropyl alcohol at 65 to 75% will cut COVID-19, kills it on contact with the vapor in just a matter of about 30 seconds. I was like, wow, that's great. I wonder if I can breathe this. So then I looked up inhalation of alcohol and discovered something that I didn't know, that they call smoking alcohol. And that is where they actually heat alcohol and people just inhale it. And because they inhale the alcohol, it goes in through their lungs, goes in through the areoli, and then goes straight into the bloodstream. And they can get intoxicated by inhaling the alcohol as opposed to drinking it. So I thought, well, if I can do that with drinking alcohol, how come I can't do that with isopropyl alcohol? So then I looked up isopropyl alcohol and the ventilation hazards and so on and so forth of it. It'll just give you a headache. So to sniff isopropyl alcohol or even to breathe a decent amount of the vapors won't hurt you. And I believe Everclear will work. I do have a doctor who was actually trying that, by the way, since talking to me. So I got the alcohol, and I said, well, I've sniffed alcohol. I'm trained in high reliability soldering. I've been around isopropyl alcohol for 30 years. That's how we clean the circuit boards after we solder them, and I've smelled alcohol. So I held it up to my nose and breathed through my nose, and oh my God, you could feel it when it went down in my lungs. I held it for about 45 seconds and I let it out, and then I breathed for a couple of minutes without the alcohol, and I felt better after the first one. So I put it up the second time and held it for 45 seconds and then waited for 2 more minutes. And then I did it the third time, and I didn't cough again for 2 days. So I went from coughing my guts out on the floor to not coughing at all.
Because you were passed out from the alcohol?
No, there's no passing out. It's just, you don't, there's no effect. It's isopropyl. It's not drinking it.
For you, there isn't. You said it just now. You have 30 years experience around these kind of chemicals. Someone who isn't as experienced, you could do more damage than good if you don't know what you're doing. As far as when you're talking about inhaling, you're not talking about huffing the bottle here. We're talking about
I just hold it under my nose and breathe through my nose.
Right.
So I put the top of the bottle against my upper lip with the cap off and go and just hold it. That's all it is to it. So I take a deep sniff, 3 deep sniffs in 5 minutes, and you're good. And so my wife, when I was doing the research, she's like thinking I'm nuts and That's
not going to work, and so on and so forth. And she was coughing unbelievably in the kitchen, and ended up laying on the floor. 70% isopropyl, 90. You only use 70. 90 is too dry, and anything below 65 is not strong enough. And they said anhydrous ammonia clears you out. You damn right it does. It'll clear out all your friends too. You'll all be together at the funeral home. Anhydrous ammonia is nothing to laugh at. But anyway, so my wife was coughing. She finally asked for the bottle. I took the bottle to her. She did the exact same thing that I did. And after 3 breaths, she didn't cough anymore either. So she got up and went to bed and slept for 9.5 hours and didn't cough once. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. Isopropyl alcohol has the ability, and that's the other thing. When you breathe it in, you can actually, when you breathe the isopropyl in, you can actually feel it cutting the virus away from the areoli inside your lungs, and you'll shortly thereafter you actually be able to cough it up. So yeah, ammonia will kill you. You're absolutely right. So that's the what we used, and it worked great, and we're recommending it to everyone. I have talked to numerous medical professionals in Costa Rica, the United States, Canada, and other places about it, and nobody has said, "No, Lee, that's bad for you," because isopropyl alcohol isn't toxic, so it doesn't have a lasting effect. It's not like you're inhaling anhydrous ammonia, which is going to destroy your lungs. It's just a vapor that is a cleaning vapor. So it's not a toxic thing, to take a couple sniffs off of it, even a dozen sniffs.
All right. Well, we do have another caller online, Jesse from Wisconsin, longtime listener and follower. Jesse, how's it going tonight?
Not too bad. Sorry, I just listening to the first part of the show. Just kind of taking a break at work and enjoying listening to Lee and talking about growing. And actually, it was funny today. They were actually talking about nebulizing hydrogen peroxide for dealing with issues of lung infections as well.
That's why I would never do that. Never do that. I would never.
That seemed like one step beyond.
Yes, it is. The alcohol is where it needs to be. There are too many hazardous
things to the hydrogen peroxide that when you're talking about going inside your lungs, that's very sensitive tissue, and you don't want anything in there like hydrogen peroxide. So yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would highly recommend not to do that. I mean, I love hydrogen peroxide for cuts, but I would never breathe it.
I tell you,
even for a cut,
I'd use it for a cut, but I wouldn't breathe it.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Right. No, but even for a cut, it's good for clearing out the dirt, but you're killing everything, your cells included with that. So.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And what part of Wisconsin are you in?
Northwestern Wisconsin, Indian Head region. Used to be over in Polk County. I hopped over the county line, so.
Yeah. So you know where what is it called? The Doles? You were talking about?
Nope. I know where the Dells are. Yeah, I'm definitely.
Yeah, the Dells. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, the Dells. Yeah, I've been there a few times myself.
Well, and the Dells are interesting if we're talking about like cold weather plants and that. They have in the Dells these algific slopes that during the wintertime the north-facing rock walls freeze with ice, and they don't thaw out until late in the spring and summer. So in these valleys in the Dells, there are all these subarctic and Arctic plants that grow that are found up, up in the tundra, but they're also found in the Dells of Wisconsin. So it's kind of it harkens back to the time when we did have the ice age and the glacier, that we have all these Arctic type plants that are in these very specific growing regions in the Dells.
Sorry, we have a little bit of a delay here on this as well. Did you have a question tonight for? Did you have a question tonight for Lee, or any specifics, or just commenting on what's happening right now?
Oh, moreover, just thinking about how many foot candles or how much light are you looking per area for the plants from growing? Because when you look at, say, even 100-watt bulb, if you bring that in closer, you got a lot more energy per square foot than when it's up higher. The one thing I was kind of curious if you've been thinking about adjusting the height of the lights as the plants grow to maximize their exposure to the light.
But the way I deal with that is I run stripes of light down both sides of the plant and always try to keep it a little bit above. Mm-hmm. And there's depending upon the light, the plant and the light. I don't. It's candles per square centimeter. Basically, what it amounts to is if you get strip lights and you keep them a couple feet away from your plants, you're good, because you're actually going to be producing more than they really need. Plants only use 3% of the light spectrum, and so they use. It's unbelievable what plants can do with so little electricity. Because when you start converting the watts to what you're growing, you're like, holy mackerel. So yeah, I like an abundance of light. If you're going to have a taller plant, you should have several layers. Another thing to do is put the shiny side of aluminum foil up, so is that any light that's inside is reflected back in. Additionally, another thing you can do is if you're using a greenhouse type situation, you've got light coming in on the north side inside, put mirrors. So is that when the light comes in from the south, it hits the plants on the southern side, but what doesn't hit the plants on the southern side passes through the plants, hits the mirror on the other side and reflects back. So you want to slightly pitch that mirror back so that it's not reflecting the light on the floor, but onto the north side of the plants from light coming from the south.
I got a question actually about reflecting the light and trying to get the biggest bang for your buck with using reflective surfaces. I've seen people use mylar, foil, that kind of stuff. What do you think about using, because I was trying to, research the most cost-effective ways. Foil can get pricey, mylar can get pricey, but what about emergency blankets? You can buy them.
You can use that. You can use anything that is highly reflective. Because now, keep in mind, if you use something that's gold,
you can buy them in bulk.
Right. If you use something that's gold, it's going to reflect more infrared than the visible light spectrum. So you definitely want to have a silver, shiny, reflective material. So, but yeah, space blankets would work great. Aluminum foil, old mirrors. Find a strip club that went out of business, they'll give you the mirrors. Go in and take them, put them on the wall. Or a restaurant, whatever. Get the mirrors from wherever they got them. There are all kinds of places you can get mirrors from.
Jesse, you growing anything indoors?
Actually, yeah, this year I started, still starting a ton of seeds.
Or is it none of my damn business?
No. Shoot. I'll tell everyone. I started snow peas and sugar snap peas. I transplanted them out there. I have Swiss chard in there. I have a whole bunch of flowers. I have about 200 cells of asparagus started. I got about the same number of onions started, and my garlic was starting to get old, and I'm like, I didn't find it out this fall, so I took a bulk tray and I put all the cloves of garlic that were starting to wilt into the bulk tray, and so I got 72 bugs of garlic in the basement that are growing out. I've actually grown celery all winter in my basement. So I had, one of those garden grow boxes that has the water reserve at the bottom. I had that out all summer. I took that into my basement, and just with a little bit of light coming in through the basement windows, I've been able to keep celery growing in my basement all winter. And pick some celery throughout the winter. And I'll take that out this year, and I'll see if it goes to seed, because it's a biannual, and it's a swamp plant. So it's a fun experiment to see what you can keep through the winter. I've also grown peppers and chili plants for multiple years. So jalapeno plant. I kept that in a pot. I got 2 years out of it. It got a little dry this winter, so it didn't make a third. But usually, pepper plants, you can get 3 years, sometimes 5 years out of a pepper plant in a pot.
Well, Jesse, thank you for calling in. We got another caller on the line, but thank you for participating tonight and talking with Lee. We hope to hear from you soon, bud. Have a good night.
Thanks for calling, buddy.
Yep, you too. And yeah, thanks, Lee. Have a good night.
Anytime. You too.
All right, Mara, we got another caller coming on, Mari.
We do. We actually have 2 more callers in
Okay.
the queue.
Keep that in mind.
So the next person, I believe, is our latest member. I don't know exactly what their YouTube name is, but I will let them introduce themselves.
All right,
now.
caller, you're on the air with Grand Solar Minimum and Lee Wheelbarger. What's your question?
Hello.
Hello there.
Hello, this is Mike Larry. I just wanted to say hi and thank you for everything. I'm a long time fly on the wall listener. I've listened to Lee on several different channels for a long time. And the one who tried to get him to come up to Bay City, Michigan and take a trip on a tall ship some time ago. So sorry you weren't able to make it up, Lee.
Yeah, we couldn't do that. And we won't be able to do it this year because they've closed the locks from Chicago down to the Mississippi. So there will be no traffic from Chicago down the Illinois Canal until October. So, yeah, we got, when Uncle Sam found out we were in D.C., they never let us go. So we're still there.
I hope the trip's going well. I've also moved from Michigan to Idaho, so I was interested in what you're talking about, the northern weather changes. And then also, I'd like to thank you for the information about breathing alcohol. We've been mixing up thieves oil and alcohol for disinfectant, and I've had a small glass jar in my pocket for a long time and would just take breaths of it through my nose. And wonder if you had any thoughts about breathing that combination of thieves oil and alcohol.
I've never done that, so I can't tell you. The other night is the first time I've ever huffed anything in my life, and definitely the first time for alcohol. I don't drink, so it was definitely new for me. So I can't tell you anything about that. That's not a combination I've ever looked at or tested. So yeah, I would look up and to see what any adverse side effects of the two are. And if there's not anything significant for an inhalation hazard, it shouldn't be a problem. And if it has municipal, advantages, great.
Well, I also want to thank you for your time and the service and all that you've done. I remember I was asking you questions about the 900 megahertz radio system. I was installing that for water, wastewater systems. And then all of a sudden, all the transmitters disappeared off the market. Did you have any more information about that?
Yeah, the rebanding for new 5G, and in rebanding, they're going to reassign some of those frequencies. So some of the frequency ranges that used to be available for certain bands of radio that were part of the APCO 25 designation. So now what they're trying to do is move some of those 900 megahertz radios down to the 700 megahertz band, and they're redistributing the frequency bands in that spectrum. Well, actually, all the way the upper frequencies are redoing all of that for 5G, and that's allowing a wider carrier frequency. So what you have to look at it is when you're trying to transmit information from one place to the other, the carrier is what you're transmitting on. The bandwidth is how wide the book is, how many lines of information you can put on it. So they used to be narrow. There were 5 kilohertz channels, 5 kc of deviation. Then when digital came in, they cut that down to 2.5 kc of deviation. And then when the really advanced radios came in, they cut it down to 1.25 kc of deviation. And that's fine for talking, but it sucks for trying to send data. So what they've
what they've decided to do is to cut that spectrum up and make wider channel allotments. And those wider channel allotments, I can still hear you, Jake. Wider channel allotments to be able to pass more data through. So that's why some of those radios are becoming antiquated and you can't get them anymore. So what I would suggest, if you're still trying to do that type of thing, is go look at the new radio formatting. If you were using 900 megahertz back then, 700 megahertz will work for you now. And it looks like they're going to be leaving 700 megahertz alone for a while because the federal government has invested heavily in that with the Department of Homeland Security and a variety of other federal government agencies.
Well, that's good to hear because that's the direction I was headed in with the 700.
Yep.
I would just like to say to the audience that I have a military background in technology, nowhere near to the level that Lee has, but I've been following the Grand Solar Minimum for a very long time, and the Grand Solar Minimum news. And if anybody has any doubts at all, I would just like to throw my hat in that I have the utmost respect and trust in Lee and Jake and Maury, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for the call, and we're glad to have you aboard. All right. Well, we got another caller. Mari, do you have a name on the caller? Or mystery caller?
We have another mystery caller. So let's bring him on and find out. I think I turned off the screening.
We like the surprise, right?
Yeah, I figured we'd go random. Like, let's see who we
Hello?
have.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Maury, Jake.
Yes. How are you? And who are we speaking with?
Randy Willis.
Randy.
Randy.
How you doing?
Hey, Randy.
Good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I have a question for Lee. A couple of them.
Okay, go ahead.
My first question is, how will we know when solar cycle 25 starts?
When there's more, well, we won't know that until after it does, because you have to see the number of sunspots per hemisphere. So it has to move from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and technically at the point of which there's more on the other, that's the beginning of the cycle. This cycle is going to be a little different, though, because with this cycle, we've got two high amplitude magnetic fields, but the problem is they're going out of phase with each other. So, you know, it's one thing when you have two of them together and they're both going in the same way. So in this case, we're adding a positive number to a negative number, and the sum is like 1 as opposed to the sum being 14. And there's a huge difference in energy between 1 and 14. And so that's when we'll know. So, but we're about there now. I think this cycle will come on and will start to come up for a couple of years, not much. This cycle will be a minimum of 30% less than the last cycle. And so that has to be, because that is the pattern of a grand solar minimum. See, before Valentina Zarkova ever started her research into the magnetic fields of the sun, Dr. Jack Eddy and Dr. John Casey, going over the same data with other people, came up with RC theory, which is the 206-year cycle of the sun. So you have 176 years of warming, followed by 30 years of cooling, and then another 176 years of warming. So we're going to do that this time again. We're at the end of that cycle. We're at the end of the 176 years of warming. Excuse me. Now we're going to go into the 30 years of cooling. And in that pattern, the way you can tell you're going into a grand solar minimum is you look at the peak number of sunspots that you have for the year, and then for the cycle, excuse me. And then the following cycle, you have a drop of 30%. Then the cycle after that, you have another drop of 30%. Now, that alone tells you you're going into a GSM. You've got 3 declining cycles in a row. That says you're moving towards it, but it doesn't guarantee it. What guarantees it is when that third cycle or the fourth cycle has a double peak, and the second peak is higher than the first peak. And when that happened back in April, if I can't remember the year now, but when that happened back during this past solar cycle, that's when myself, John Casey, and everybody else who had been following this knew for sure that we were going to go into a GSM, because it went back up and the peak exceeded the previous peak. That is the key sign. That's what tells you for sure we're going into a GSM. So that's how we knew that we were going to do a GSM. And everybody thought we were crazy, but we've studied hundreds of years of sunspots. So Valentina Zarkova comes along and she starts doing the math, but she does it from the magnetic fields that are recorded of the sun at the Wilcox Solar Observatory in California. And so she took all of their data of the 4 electromagnetic fields in the sun. Now, those fields are very, very stable. The sun is a super stable oscillator just simply because of its mass. It's not going to change frequency. It's been the same resonance for a long, long time. The issue is that there are 4 separate fields in the sun, and those 4 separate fields are not on the same frequency. They're slightly off. So because of that, they come in phase and they go out of phase. So it's just like having 2 motors running on an airplane and they're slightly out of phase. You'll hear it go round, round, round. When it's louder, the 2 are in phase. The sun is doing the exact same thing. It's brighter, it's warmer. We have more sunspots. We've got more giant magnetic umbels coming out of the sun, being rooted into the sun at the sunspots. And they act like heating elements. They make the sun a little warmer. They put out a lot of energy, and they keep all of the galactic cosmic rays away and keep the heliosphere strong and keep the electromagnetic field on the Earth strong. So everything's great. But when those magnetic fields go out of phase, which is what she discovered is going on, the sun gets weak. And as it gets weak, we get a weaker heliosphere, which is what protects us from the galactic cosmic rays. We get a weaker magnetosphere on the planet that allows more cosmic rays to come in. We get bigger coronal holes on the sun that allows more cosmic rays to spew out. So this cycle will be much different, because as those 2 fields go out of phase, the sun will get weaker. So we'll kind of be going up in the cycle for the next couple of years, but then it's going to start falling off, because it's got to fall off because those 2 magnetic fields are canceling each other out, which means the sun's going to get weaker, which means that the sun itself will not be able to sustain 3,000 gals per square meter, which means you can't have a sunspot. So there's going to be a point where we can't have them because we're so weak. So we'll go right back to the Maunder minimum type phasing. And when you look at all the paintings of the time of the Maunder minimum and you look at the sky, you'll see that the sky was pretty much totally cloud covered. Nobody ever saw the sun hardly. So it's going to be an interesting sun cycle.
We got about
I think the next 3 are.
We got about 2 more minutes. Randy, did you have a second question?
CMEs and the EMPs that you've talked about, do they destroy electronics that are unplugged as well? That were
It depends. It depends upon if there is a wire that is connected to that electronic that is over. An EMP will destroy the electronics. A CME will not. A CME will only affect electronics that have wires greater than 30 feet if it's a very, very strong, or wires greater than 300 feet if it's a weaker storm. So 300 feet for a weak one, 30 for a strong one. So if you have a CME coming, you've got more than 18 hours, just unplug that stuff.
Oh, okay.
EMP, I can't help you. That happens in picoseconds.
Okay.
Go ahead, Randy.
My last question. So if one of those hit and we lose power, how would we take care of our indoor crops?
You would have to have your own power system, your own solar power system. This is why I recommend, everybody call the Solark in Texas. and get one of their systems. It's EMP and CME protected. It's a 48-volt system. You can put an 11 kW solar array. I'd recommend putting in probably 40 kW worth of batteries, and it's got plenty of power, and you can power everything. Because if you don't prepare, it's not going to be good. Remember, proper pre-planning prevents piss poor performance. I've been saying that for 40 years.
All right, Randy, thank you for your call tonight, sir, and we appreciate your support here at the Grand Solomon. Thank you very much, Randy.
All right, you guys have a good night.
You too, bud.
You too. Thanks for calling.
Wow. So, Lee, we blew through an hour in no time.
I'm good for another one if you want.
Well, I was kind of hoping maybe we could have you back next Friday night and do this again, because I think we started getting more callers at the end here, and so maybe we'll promote another show for this week. Lee Wheelbarger, the inventor here, guys. His expertise from military weaponry, electronics, anything solar related. He is responsible for the United States' largest solar powered yacht. This guy is full of tricks and trades. I've known him now for a little under 4 years. And I tell you, the reason why I am still doing this research is thanks to your assistance in the very beginning of all of this and helping me gain a common foundation of how to understand what's happening. And really, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I feel like that thanks to the information that you've passed along to me and others, we've helped a lot of people get off of that nonsense of CO2. A lot more folks are awake now. I think a lot more people are paying attention to space weather than they ever have before. So, again, Lee, I love having you on. I'm glad you were able to spend the evening with us tonight. And let's just go ahead and say next Friday night.
Yeah, we can do that. That's fine.
Awesome.
And one of the, Cheryl was asking, it's a Solark, SOLARK. And when you call them, tell them Lee sent you.
Also, Lee Wheelbarger has joined us in previous conversations on COVID. That will be done over at our sister channel at WTF Sky. That will be this week, and Lee, you're always welcome to join in on that conversation, as you have a very important role here recently with the White House. So I'd really like to actually, when we talk about that, I want to have the email and everything that you presented.
Yeah, I've got the email that I wrote to the White House. I mean, I wrote, for those of you who didn't catch it earlier, I wrote the White House and the Department of Homeland Security this morning in reference to some of my inventions, as well as to some of the things that I think that they misstated in the White House briefing yesterday. So I was calling them out for providing somewhat misleading information.
Yeah, and it kind of happened again today, and unfortunately, we didn't see any questions after today's briefing, which I'll be honest with you, Lee. I wish they were kind of like they were tonight the whole time. Just stick to the facts, stick to the information, give your update, and thank everybody and let them go home, because those reporters sit in that room for an hour waiting. And, I just think tonight's, as short and sweet as it was, tonight's press briefing was way more informative to me and more impactful than the previous ones that I've seen. Mari, did you have something to say? I know.
I just wanted to thank Bezic for becoming our newest member on YouTube. Thank you. Hopefully we can have you call in on our next call-in show.
Yeah.
On GSM, which would be next Friday on
9 p.m.
Our sister channel, WTF Sky, which covers all topics. We're having another call-in show beta testing.
You want to do it tomorrow night?
A public number. It's already scheduled, actually.
Oh, I didn't see it. What time?
At 9 o'clock.
I knew I had you around for a reason. So what would I do without you and your schedule?
I created the event on WTFsky.com, our sister channel. So we'll be covering all kinds of stuff, from politics, COVID stuff. There's a few things going on with meteor showers and space stuff. So that's going to be an open forum chit chat, 9 p.m. tomorrow.
And Lee, like I said, you're more than welcome to join us on our live stream tomorrow. We'll have a little chat about COVID. And
that phone number, the call-in phone number for that is I'm testing out a totally open public phone number.
Oh boy.
I think it's risky and scary, but at the same time, it might lead to some interesting
right.
conversations.
Let's talk to America.
And
crazy America.
With that channel
Mari says.
having open topic, who knows where the conversation will go. So I'm excited about that format tomorrow.
And guys, I want to thank everybody for being patient. I know our scheduling has been a little weird. 4 o'clock shows works out for some folks and 4 o'clock doesn't work out for others. But we are going to try to mix it up to keep the 4 o'clock shows in place, but also do evening shows like tonight's call-in show, WTF Sky. We'll start more conversations and updates and reports on that channel as well. That's going to be more political, current events.
We're trying to
space
add
news.
more content.
Yeah,
now
so
that we have sort of our quarantine bearings in place, sort of.
And not only that, but WTF Sky is a little bit different of a personality, I should say. Lee remembers the early days before we got this channel started.
More rowdy.
Definitely rowdy, definitely a little bit, but also fun. So never a dull moment.
Fun and friendly, but it couldn't go a little.
It can get a little haywire.
A little shock jockish, I guess.
Still sideways. Huh?
Still sideways, yes, Lee. Well, Lee, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us tonight. We hope to hear from you tomorrow night, or just get a hold of me on Skype and we'll just plug you in on the show with the COVID talk. But again, it's been a pleasure having time to talk to you, and thanks for answering questions for our subscribers.
Anytime. That's what we're here for, is to educate people, you know.
That's right.
And know the truth and share it.
Guys, check out Lee Wheelbarger's channel. It's named Inventor Lee Wheelbarger. He does daily updates. He covers really every kind of topic that's very useful to everyone. So it's politics, it's current events, it's weather, it's extreme, whatever event is going on. Lee's got a pretty good nose finding the story out there. So make sure you check out his channel, subscribe, and he definitely will be around next week for our call-in show. Again, thanks for everyone who called in tonight. Mari, thank you for organizing everything in the chat, keeping everybody sane.
Thanks for tuning in. Good night, everybody.
We'll talk soon, guys.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.